Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our second session. My name is Liz, and I'm the philanthropy manager here at Faunalytics. First up, we have Rhiddhi Patel of Fish Welfare Initiative, India Foundation, and Vaishnavi Vasanth of the Animal Law and Policy Network. We will present an expert overview on how unsustainable aquaculture practices affect fish welfare, food safety, and public health, and why stronger laws and policies are urgently needed.
Hello everyone, my name is Vaishnavi Vasanth and I'm joined by Rhiddhi Patel to present on the topic Understanding the Link Between Aquaculture and Public Health in India. India is the world's second largest fish producer, and for our report, we focused on freshwater aquaculture. Now, why you should care about this is because we want to make a compelling argument for policymakers to focus on fish health and welfare by linking it with human health. We want to motivate them to make stricter regulations, better surveillance, and to integrate welfare standards into national health and safety programs. The challenges with freshwater aquaculture in India is that there's increased use of antibiotics leading to drug resistance, food safety issues due to the kinds of fish that enter markets, which are disease-ridden and parasite-ridden and are antimicrobial and chemical laced. There's also a lot of aquaculture pollution affecting local communities and causing a lot of environmental damage. For our research, we focused on Yeluru in Andhra Pradesh, which is one of the major hubs of aquaculture. And there are three parts to this report. Firstly, there is the wet market fish analysis, which included antibiotic sensitivity testing and disease examination. And there is also the farmer surveys, where we surveyed about 37 farmers in the area. And despite the small sample size, we're treating this study as a scoping study to inform further studies in this area. To start with antibiotic sensitivity, this basically means isolating bacteria from the fish we've sampled from the local wet market and administering antibiotics to check how reactive the bacteria are to these antibiotics. And 15 out of 18 fish showed higher resistance to oxytetracycline, and 9 out of the 18 fish showed resistance to pefloxacin. There was moderate resistance to enrofloxacin, but our survey of farmers shows that there's increasing usage of this antibiotic. And so for that, our recommendations um, are along these lines. We recommend that there be a study to track antibiotic resistance, especially for oxytetracycline, pefloxacin, and enrofloxacin across various regions, and ban them in the case of high resistance. Um, the effective use of antibiotics should be monitored and should allow only for their therapeutic use. There should be limits on the antibiotic residues. There should be enforcement of limits on the antibiotic residues of fish that are sold to consumers. And there should be, farms should be managed to prevent antibiotic pollution in communal water bodies. Our second part to this study is about fish disease. And unfortunately, out of the 16 fish that were sampled, all of them showed multiple diseases, indicating poor husbandry conditions. Poor physical conditions include damaged liver and fatty liver. Some of the diseases include red disease, body columnaris, and trichotillomaniasis. And so our recommendations to help improve this situation is for better pond management, including low stocking density, better water quality, and disease management. Training manuals for farmers should be updated based on One Health and the latest science. We should engage with authorities for widespread adoption and enforcement of an efficient surveillance system for fish diseases. There should be a coalition between human health experts and veterinary experts to address this intersection between fish health and human health. We should also engage with food safety authorities to implement routine and random testing of fish at wet markets for chemical residues and antibiotic residues. And the next part of the study involves the farmer surveys, and Rhiddhi will present.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. So we spoke to around 37 farmers as part of this survey in 2 rounds. First, we'll talk about our findings on stocking densities. What we saw was that farmers are stocking even the same species of fish in varying densities, and that there are no clear guidelines or policies on safe stocking density caps for freshwater inland aquaculture in India. This, of course, has a bearing on fish welfare, public health, and the environment. And what advocacy groups can do here is to advocate for species specific density standards, also demand traceability and certification schemes that clearly include density caps, and also highlighting the link between stocking density and disease and antibiotic use is important. Our findings on fish diseases, reporting of fish diseases, also showed a disturbing trend. About out of the 19 farmers that we spoke to, none of the farmers reported fish diseases to authorities. Now, there is a requirement under Indian law to report certain diseases to authorities. For example, 76% of the farmers admitted to seeing EUS, which is red disease, on their farms, and about 30% of the farmers admitted to Argillus or lice infestations. But even after both of these diseases being notifiable, which require reporting to authorities, none of the farmers did so. And this does impact, have an impact on AMR, also by hiding antibiotic use, hiding the spread of diseases. This also has an implication on food safety and adds to the issue of traceability in the industry, or lack of traceability rather in the industry. And what advocacy groups can do here is to understand local laws and policies on disease reporting, show how hidden outbreaks can drive AMR, also advocating for fish disease surveillance to be part of larger public health systems, and promoting traceability systems that document outbreaks and chemical use on farms is important. Next, we will look at the use of sanitizers. Now, sanitizer is a term that is used for chemicals like formalin, BKC, bromine, methylene blue, etc. And about 90% of the farmers actively and regularly admitted to using sanitizers at varying frequencies. These are basically chemicals. These are some of these are highly toxic, and not only toxic to fish, which cause gill stress and skin irritation, but they are also toxic to workers through exposure. They can also harm the environment and cause food safety concerns. So, our recommendations here would be to highlight how these residues show up basically in aquatic ecosystems, in aquatic animal products. Also, working towards guidelines for responsible use of such chemicals in aquaculture is important. And framing the misuse of such chemicals as a fish health and fish welfare concern, which also impacts public health, is important. Next, we look at the disposal of deceased dead fish. So, a majority of the farmers, around 54%, admitted to just burying fish right on the banks of the ponds instead of away from the ponds in a biosecured way. Minority of the farmers, around 14%, agreed to disposing or just dumping carcasses in the open on the banks of the ponds. Around 16% agreed to using bleach or aluminum phosphate, which are both toxic, without burial. And one farmer even admitted to dumping carcasses directly in the canal next to his pond. So these are also in contravention of the legal requirements in the country. And what we recommend advocacy groups do here is to promote guidelines for sanitary carcass disposal, or if guidelines already exist, then document unsafe disposal and work towards enforcement of those guidelines. Warning against using toxic chemicals also for disposal, carcass disposal is important, and highlighting how these unsafe disposal practices can contaminate ponds and the ecosystem around ponds is also crucial. Lastly, we look at effluent discharge, and currently, except coastal aquaculture. Inland freshwater aquaculture is not, the pollution from it is not regulated in India, which is a policy gap. And 100% of the farmers are currently discharging polluted effluent directly into canals, drains, and outlets. Most of these farmers reuse the same water for about 9 cycles at least, from 2 to 9 cycles, and some even use the same water for 5 to 6 years, engaging only in partial water exchange and frequent sanitizer use to manage bad water quality. So the effluent is basically very polluted by the time it's time to discharge it, and this does have a major implication on the environment and public health. So we recommend that people working in this space look at collecting evidence from the field to understand how these chemicals are showing up either in and pathogens also are showing up either in water or soil, in and around aquaculture ponds, and also advocate for stronger aquaculture effluent management standards or policy in the region that you're working in. So this brings us to the end of the presentation. We talk about not just these issues, but a lot more issues and findings that we had in, we will talk about it in our report that is going to come out on the 21st of November on World Fisheries Day. So do keep an eye out for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It looks like we have a few questions. So the first one, what sanctions are in place for farmers that fail to report illnesses in the pond population? And relatedly, what state oversight, if any, exists to evaluate health of these ponds?
Right. So there is a central law in place which requires farmers to report diseases. Now in India we have central fisheries and aquaculture also falls under the state jurisdiction. So for the state that we did our research in, there are some requirements at the state level where officers of the department are required to visit ponds and uh, check for health of the ponds and the animals. The farmers are also required to maintain records of inputs and health records, but enforcement is quite poor. There's also a central law that requires diseases to be reported, but again, enforcement is a concern, and there are some penalties under both the state and the central framework.
Amazing. Thank you. There's another question here. Megan is curious to know if there are any planned farmer education outreach efforts based on the findings.
So these are very preliminary findings, and we are going to come up with our report soon. But we are definitely thinking about ways to kind of improve awareness and build some capacity around the issues that we have noticed through our surveys and through the research. But there are some efforts on the government's end also to do outreach, but they're not, they don't reach each and every farmer. A lot of the farmers actually that we spoke to didn't receive any formal training or any capacity building from the government, and they were farmers basically who learned how to do farming through their peers or through generational knowledge.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay. I'm seeing more questions than I know we're going to have time to ask. I'm going to ask one more. And then just a reminder for everybody, if you want to continue the discussion, you can go into the breakout room after all the speakers from this session. So this one is, how is your opinion on polyculture farming versus monoculture farming?
I have a very general overview on this. I haven't looked too deeply into this, but I think there's a lot of polyculture being promoted right now by the government, because of course there is better utilization of land and resources. So polyculture is getting really, really popular. And monoculture, we have like a mixed bag of farmers who do monoculture as well. Polyculture systems are supposed to also be more resilient. But what I can say is currently there is a growing trend for towards polyculture.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. I'm seeing incredible feedback in the chat. I hope we have a chance to check that out, that your research findings are truly eye-opening. It's such a well-detailed and important presentation. So just amazing, and thank you so much. I also wanted to kind of add in here and announce that Faunalytics will be publishing the latest edition of our Faunalytics Fundamentals. And the series is actually going to be looking at aquaculture, covering everything from public opinion to antibiotic resistance to environmental impacts on fish welfare. So for everybody who's attending today, make sure you sign up for Faunalytics newsletter to be the first to hear when it publishes in early October. Really, really excited about that. Alrighty, next up, we're going to be welcoming Spencer Roberts. So Spencer Roberts is a marine ecologist at the University of Miami and environmental journalist, and will share how data from the fishing industry can be used to reveal the immense scale of marine life exploitation and make the case for recognizing fishes as wildlife deserving of protection.
What's up? I'm Spencer, PhD researcher at the University of Miami, and this is a crash course on open access marine science and fishing industry databases. This goes over 10 minutes. I'm just going to speed it up. So if I sound ridiculous, that's why. Fish are the most hunted wild animals in the world. The global fishing industry kills at least 1 trillion fish every year to produce 1% of the world's food. So because of the commercial nature of the exploitation of fishes, they produce a wealth of data that we can access, and I'm going to show you how to do some of that. So the first resource I'm going to show you here is See Around Us. All of the URLs are going to be up here. I'm not going to read them out, but I'm just going to walk through them. So See Around Us, if you're interested in patterns of global catch, this is the authoritative resource. A lot of the time you'll see the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization cited, and they do have a lot of good data, but up to 30% of the catch in some years is actually not captured in the FAO data because the FAO simply doesn't ask for it. So if you want a complete, comprehensive picture of the reality of global fishing catch, See Around Us is your resource. And I'm just going to show you how to use some of these queries. There we go. You can see here the reported catch line. That is the FAO data. And here you can use all of these different drop downs to customize your query. I'm just going to show an interesting insight here. When we look by fishing sector, you can see that the subsistence sector, for instance, in orange here, comprises less than 3% of the global catch. So when you hear about the importance of the seafood industry for nutrition, you can keep that in mind. Another thing you can do is check out the maps resource here. And by the way, this is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much stuff here in the See Around Us. I can't possibly show you all of it. What I'm going to do here is punch in my favorite animal, scalloped hammerheads for Luani. And you don't need to know the Latin names, but I'm just going to show them for the educational value. And it shows here by country the catch of scalloped hammerheads around the world. These critically endangered sharks. I'm going to show our country, my country at least, the United States. You can see a lot of these sharks are caught here. You know, we hear all the time about United States, best managed fisheries in the world. What a joke. I digress. If you are interested, however, in the FAO data, because this is good for some purposes, like perhaps if you want to know about invertebrates like octopuses, you can come here. They'll be sort of lumped together in the See Around Us, but disaggregated in the FAO data. So you can search octopus, and you can select if you are only interested in big blue octopus. You can just do that, or maybe you can look at all the species. Mind you, there's a few pages here, so you can sort by the year, by the country, etc. Customize your query, and you can download the data that come from your query right here. All of these are going to be fully downloadable, publicly accessible databases. Some of them will require creating an account, but that's it. Next resource I'm going to show you is Global Fishing Watch. This is an incredible resource. What this does is use what's called AIS data. This is automatic identification systems. It's basically satellite positions of the world's fishing fleets, and not just fishing fleets, but also we have cargo vessels and oil tankers and everything here. And in some places where we don't have GPS data, we have inferred locations of fishing vessels from radar. That's what you see in the orange here around South America. So just as a quick demo, I'm going to show you an interesting case study. I'm just going to show you how intuitive this site is. You don't have to be a GIS analyst. You don't have to be a scientist. We have all these different gadgets and customizable options here. I'm going to turn on this EEZs slider. This is the exclusive economic zones or the territorial waters, and you can see these popping up on the map. I'm going to direct your attention to this circle here. That's the Johnston Atoll. It's part of the Pacific Islands Heritage National Monument. You may have heard about Trump's executive order to open up this monument to commercial fishing. And I'm just going to show you how we can look by changing the time slider here. It's going a little slow on me. There we go. I'm going to show you in April before the executive order, and then open it up to after, and we can see the commercial fishing fleet moving in. You can even animate it like this. It'll show it over time. Maybe it doesn't work with my Zoom running. It's just I'm asking my computer to do a lot here. But you saw about the court order, perhaps, telling the administration they had to go back, create the new laws. All of this fishing activity was illegal, and it was captured by Global Fishing Watch. Incredible, powerful resource. Now, if you want to know about the biological information about any species of fish or even marine mammals or invertebrates, you go to fish base or sea life base here for the non-fish. So I'm going to show you another one of my favorites, Epinephrylus striatus. That's the Nassau grouper, another critically endangered species. And you look them up in fish base, you can see the depth range, their temperature tolerance. Do they live on reefs? Where are they distributed throughout the world? What's their life history? Do you want to know what they eat? You can open up one of these with all these different tables. Here's the food items table, all these species that Nassau groupers eat, captured by all these different studies, all recorded in fish base. And so is their geographic distribution, which leads me to the next resource, which is Aquamaps. And fish base and Aquamaps, by the way, are both affiliated with the sea around us. So this is all kind of one enormous, incredible resource here. And Aquamaps works very similarly to fish base. This time I'll just try. This time I'll try the common name, and you can look it up that way too. It was there for a second. Okay, there we go. And here is the global distribution of the Nassau grouper. So you can download this here in a CSV format. You can import that to GIS. And you can look at, maybe you could use Global Fishing Watch data and look at the overlap between this fish's habitat and commercial fishing activity. And a lot of these databases, you can also set up an API. If you know how to code, if you want to use R, you can set up an API to query these databases and loop through a list of species or something like that. This is an example of something I'm doing here. You can do similar things with Python. Just look at the documentation for each of these databases and see what they can do and how you can hit them with code. Next resource I'm going to show you is the RAM Legacy database. So if you're interested in the status of a fish population over time, you can see these time series. And this is basically the place where all the global stock assessments are stored. Now, Sea Around Us is working on this too. They're going to have a resource called the Global Fishing Index, which is actually going to be much better. That's going to be coming out, I think, in a few months. But in the meantime, here's how the RAM Legacy stock assessment database works. Let's go ahead and look by region. Let's open up the Pacific Ocean, and we can look at the status of some of these tuna populations, right? Some of these really heavily targeted species out in the open ocean. And the Kobe plots are a little bit esoteric, but here's the more straightforward stuff. This is the total biomass, the spawning stock biomass, the fishing mortality. So you can see these time series. And you can also access this data through R if you want to get that in a more workable database format. If you are interested in like the domestic side, if you're interested in, for instance, let's say the sandbar shark in the United States, you might want to go to the NOAA Fisheries StockSmart database. So we'll pull up the sandbar shark time series, and here's that big drop curve. The sandbar sharks were heavily targeted for their fins. That's why they're endangered today. And you can see the fishing mortality over time. You can see all these different metrics that we can use and access in the NOAA Fisheries StockSmart database. And so next, I'm just going to show you a little bit of an idea of how you can use these data. So this is my site, very much under construction, my Oracle Fish Defender. Here is my research page, some of the papers I've worked on so far. But before I show you that, I should show you, in case you aren't an academically affiliated researcher, how you can access some of these data some of these papers that are behind paywalls, because it's really a crime that these publicly funded research papers are not publicly accessible. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for all papers, but I know it works for this one. Oops, for this one. There we go. And the way it works, this site is called Sci-Hub, and it's probably the most badass of these databases. You just punch in the URL here, hit open. Again, it doesn't work for all. There we go. And here is the full study. You can access the whole thing here. So that's just an incredibly important resource for the open access of publicly funded data. So here is our most recent study. And this is a really cool example of using websites that aren't supposed to be databases. So what we did here is we used web crawlers to scrape data off of open web marketplaces like eBay and Etsy. You're looking for endangered species. The vast majority of what we found were sharks, endangered shark jaws all over the internet. Here's the top 10 species. 9 of them were sharks. Here's the breakdown of the top species. You can see tons of endangered sharks here. And so this is a really important and powerful way that with a little bit more work and a little bit more expertise, you can get data from other sites too. And so that leads me into what we're working on now. One of the projects that we're doing involves scraping social media for shark fishing posts that involve illegal poaching. So we're going to need, we can get a lot of things from code, but we also need manual research. So if you want to intern with my lab and help us to document social media shark poaching, to make the case to regulators and social media platforms to do something about this epidemic of shark poaching, you can hit me up at this email, info@fishdefender.org, or spencer.roberts@miami.edu. And you can also follow me at any and all of these social media sites. So please check me out there. And thanks for watching this presentation. I'll stop there and open it up to your questions. What's up?
Wow, that was a wonderful presentation packed with so much information. I personally have a million questions, but I will leave it to others who have some questions first. I'm seeing what's the most important first step for an advocacy group that wants to start using this strategy to hold online platforms accountable?
In terms of social media platforms?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Something I'm trying to think about. Some of them have oversight boards. I know that Meta has an oversight board. They own Instagram and Facebook. So we're going to make an appeal to them once we're able to put together. In real life, I talk a lot slower. Once we put together a database of shark poaching on social media. And trying to use public pressure, I don't know that I have the right answer to that. We're going to try to try some different approaches, and if you want to follow along, maybe you can see what succeeds.
Amazing. I'm also seeing one quick comment about having your email repeated. So if you want to make sure that you drop that in the chat, somebody's contact information. I'm curious, what is the single most effective chart or statistic that you've come across that can show the urgency of this overfishing crisis?
That is a really good question. You know, I recently I came across a study. So we talk about, and there was a really great presentation earlier from, I think his name was Thomas, or Richie. He talked about nutrition, and we're always talking about, or we're always hearing about the importance of the fishing industry and aquaculture for nutrition. We hear this statistic that's reported all the time: 3 billion people rely on the ocean for food from the FAO, and it's really misleading. The way that that stat is calculated is if a person obtains at least 20% of their animal protein from seafood, animal protein is not a nutritionally relevant. There's no difference nutritionally. I mean, there's different micronutrients, but buried in the FAO reports are the actual breakdowns by calories and by protein in seafood contributes 1.2% of the calories that the world eats. And we're killing over at least 1 trillion, maybe over 2 trillion animals, just fish then there's all the invertebrates to that. And this some recent research, and I think that stuff is really powerful, although it's hard to get. It's just we're just kind of putting together this picture of the exploitation of fish in terms of population, in terms of individuals, because they're reported by mass, right? But in when we think of any other animals, this is something that would be inexcusable if you were talking about how many lions were killed by trophy hunting or how many birds died from windows, and you told everyone in kilograms. They would say, "What are you talking about? How many animals died?" And we accept this and because it's all we have, but we're starting to put it together. Those are these great researchers in the UK. They have an org called Fish Count, and yeah, the papers that they're starting to publish, I don't think they've really charted them, and maybe that's something that needs to be worked on, but it dwarfs everything else. And it is the most, like, if you care about wildlife, if you care about animals, fish and crustaceans in the wild are the most urgent, pressing issue.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering those questions. I see a few more. So to everybody who has additional questions, please follow Andrea into the breakout room where you can ask additional questions. And next,